Welcome. Before we dive in today, um, I should tell you I am Lady Dane Figueroa Edidi, and I will be beginning with the land acknowledgement for today. We acknowledge that the land on which we now reside is stolen land. This land and most land has been commodified so it could be violently taken by colonizers from sovereign indigenous communities. We acknowledge the Pueblo peoples, the Lenape peoples, the Muskogee peoples, the Duwamish peoples, the Piscataway peoples, on whose land the participants of today's event reside. We take a moment to acknowledge the Ohlone people, on whose land Zoom headquarters resides. Within our virtual space, we must acknowledge all Indigenous peoples across the globe. Because of you, this gathering is possible. May we honor you and yours, Ashe. Now let us say this, while land acknowledgements have become common practice, it is not the work. Let me repeat that real quick, just in case you ain't hear me. Now let us say this, while land acknowledgements have become common practice, it is not the work. Acknowledging the theft does not equal reparations. This be a call to action, to examine one's own role within the fabric of colonization, to commit oneself to being in right relationship to the land and the indigenous peoples of it, to ask oneself, what your commitment is to giving the land back, to ensuring elderhood for these communities, to honor indigenous ancestors whose land was stolen and who was forced to work this land by colonizers, to telling the truth about the foundation of the United States, and to commit to working to dismantle white supremacy and other oppressive forces that continue to harm the planet, our indigenous siblings, and us. Ashe.
I just want to invite folks to take a moment, just reflecting on what the Lady Dane's opening around land acknowledgement, and in the chat, feel free to put your name, your pronoun, organization name, and you can go to nativeland.ca. We'll drop that in the thank you, Evelyn. And yeah, just so you can see that you're here, so you can be present and bring your full self into the space. So we'll take a few moments for that, and then we'll continue with our welcome. We're so happy you're all here, and I should introduce myself. My name is Sheena Johnson. I'm the Senior Director of Grant Making here at Groundswell Funds, and extremely happy that you're all here.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Vanessa Daniel. My pronouns are she and her. I'm the Executive Director here at Groundswell Fund and Groundswell Action Fund, and it is truly my pleasure to welcome you here today. I am so thrilled to see the incredible turnout for this event. And you all are in for a great experience. The speaker lineup today is fire. And the vision and the plan for the Black Trans Fund that is going to be unveiled towards the end of this call is truly inspiring. I want to say how honored Groundswell is to be housing the Black Trans Fund, and until it's ready to take flight as its own 501c3. And that we really see the invitation, which is an invitation we're also extending to each and every one of you today to support this effort, as a remarkable opportunity to be a part of something historic. The first national fund in the United States dedicated to supporting Black trans communities. And not only that, but true embodiment and expression of self-determination and philanthropy, with a fund that is supporting Black trans people and that is created and led by Black trans leaders. The design is innovative, the impact in the community is already felt and powerful, and the excitement and the momentum around this fund is so strong. Already more than 1,300 donors and foundations have been inspired to give to the Black Trans Fund. So this webinar is an invitation for all of you to help the Black Trans Fund build on that momentum and take the work to the next level. I want to say something real quick, actually on a personal note. You know, there are a lot of things that I am so excited for Groundswell to be a part of. and be involved with. But I'll tell you that this project is something that I am personally excited to be involved with. I have been working in social justice movements for almost 25 years as an organizer and as a funder. And I just want to testify that the Black Trans Fund is one of the efforts that I am most proud to have ever been a part of. And that Breanne Rivera is one of the most incredible visionary leaders I have ever met. And I'm so excited for you all to hear her brilliance, to hear the brilliance of the leaders of this fund. And the other day when I heard that Janet Mock had called up Bree to congratulate her on her work, I was not surprised. She is a force. So just really, really excited for you all to experience and hear from her. And I want to invite each and every one of you to lean in today to learning about this work and to joining with Groundswell and being a part of history by supporting it, helping these incredible leaders hit their $5 million goal to be able to help this fund take flight. We can do it as a community. So I want to hand it off now to who's going to share more about our plan for our time together, the incredible leader of our Black Trans Fund, Breanne Rivera. Over to you, Bree.
Thank you so much, Bea, for that warm welcome. Thank you, Sheena. Thank you, Bev. And thank you, Lady Dane, for that powerful land acknowledgement. My name is Bree Rivera, she, her, and I am calling from Albuquerque, New Mexico, the land of the Pueblos. And it is my pleasure to invite you all to, welcome you all to BTF's first spring briefing. Yeah, there was a lot of work that went into making this happen. So just really want to shout out the Groundswell team and the Black Trans Fund team, for making this a success. And so I am really excited to be the program officer of the Black Trans Fund and be able to be head of a fund that really speaks to the joy and liberation of Black trans communities. I myself come from grassroots movement. I ran an organization in Detroit that was for Black trans women. And, you know, one of the things that really helped me shape and inspire the work that's happening within BTF was just a reflection of how I was treated as a grassroots organizer of a newly emerging organization. And so for us, one of the things that is just very powerful is that, like, when Black trans folks take charge and control of their own destiny, there's just a lot of backlash that happens. And so for us, you know, we saw that folks in community and folks within philanthropy actually didn't believe in or trust Black trans leadership, and they actually looked at us as like victims and statistics. I'm so happy to announce that despite all of the hardships that happened during my role as an executive director, we were able to unlock resources for Black trans women. We were one of the first leading organizations to have an emergency assistance program available for our girls, because we understood that one of the key components to actually getting our girls organized and mobilized was actually providing them with a level of care that they had not seen before. And so for us, when we looked at our membership, we just didn't see Black trans women who are at risk for HIV, who were, you know, more likely to be victims of violence. We actually saw joy, resilience, strength, and power. And so our emergency assistance program actually allowed for our girls to show up meaningfully while also getting their needs immediately met. And so that is just a little bit of framing as to like how Black Trans Fund came into existence, and really wanting to name that for me as a Black trans leader, this fund is not only revolutionary, but it's actually a reflection of like how I show up in communities for Black trans folks, leading with joy, liberation, and trust. I'm really excited to share with you all a little bit more about the vision of BTF later on in today's presentation, but really wanted to share with you all some of our framing as to, you know, the work that BTF wants to accomplish in the world. So Black Trans Fund's logo is a triangle. And our logo was created by the amazing and talented Ripley Bennett, a Black trans designer that I've known for years. And when we first started out the visioning of Black Trans Fund, I sat down and I had a conversation with her about this vision of this logo, not really sure as like how I wanted it to look. And you know, Ripley actually like took my words and actually built something that was really beautiful. And so when she showed me the triangle, she was like, you know, Bree, I don't know if this is like really what you were thinking. She was like, I wanted to create something that was sleek, that had a lot of angles to it. And when I saw the logo and I saw the triangle, it reminded me of the pyramids of Egypt. And so for folks that don't know, one of the main framings for BTF was that I knew that I wanted to fund Black trans communities, but I also wanted to build something that would sustain the test of time. And what other visual representation embodies that, like the pyramids in Egypt? And so for me, when I sat back and actually looked at the pyramids and started to think more deeply about like the pyramids, who built them and why, realizing that, you know, we get to see the end product. We get to see these beautiful pyramids that have stood the test of time, but no one actually really gets to talk about the stories of the builders and the joy and liberation that they experienced as they were building something that would stand the test of time. And so for us, the stories of joy and liberation are most important to our building of this triangle, which is BTF, something that will stand the test of time. And those stories are super important because for Black trans communities, the wins for us are not necessarily the most important parts of the work. It's actually how the organizations and Black trans leaders across the country are actually holding communities with care and love. And so for us, our building blocks are the room for the night, the bus fare, and the community care that allows Black trans communities to actually get their immediate needs met, show up and show out for the collective freedoms and liberation for us all. And so really excited to be able to share more about the work of BTF. But before we do that, we are going to go into our amazing panel. We have 4 Black trans leaders who are running phenomenal organizations across the country. And so for us, supporting their work is part of our building blocks of living into our vision of joy and liberation for Black trans communities. So we will hear from organizations that are providing direct care to communities, organizations that are building leadership and capacity among Black trans leaders. We will hear from an organization that is keeping Black trans folks out of jail. And if Black trans folks do get locked up, they are there to support them with additional supports like paying rent, because we know that folks lose their jobs. And then lastly, we will hear from an amazing group of creators who are actually transforming the way that Black trans communities are talked about in face spaces. And so super excited to be able to turn it over to those folks. But really just wanting to name that, you know, I'm not a pharaoh. I don't have a lot of money. And so Black Trans Fund would not be able to exist without the unique incubation that is happening within Groundswell Fund, that one allows us as Black trans leaders to be able to like focus on the vision and get very clear and move as much money to the field as possible, while also allowing us to save as much money as possible and build a reserve, because we know that there has been tremendous giving during the coronavirus pandemic. And we also know that that giving is going to dry up eventually. And so it'll be Black Trans Fund's responsibility, not only to be able to provide grants to Black trans communities, but building capacity as well. And so just really wanting to thank and just name the visionary work that's happening within Groundswell that allows Black trans communities to lead. And yeah, so today's conversation, we're going to go through a little agenda. So first you heard from me and all of my remarks. Now we're going to move into a grantee panel where we'll hear from 4 leading Black trans led organizations around the country. And then we will go into BTF's 2020 impact and talk more about our 5-year plan and share our 2025 vision. We'll have some space left for some collective reflections. And then we're going to talk about next steps. And so without further ado, I would like to introduce the moderator of our panel today, Jay Mace, who will share a little bit more information about our framing and talk more about the amazing work that Black trans leaders are leading across the country. Jay Mace.
All right. Yeah, so thank you, Bree, one, for your vision, and thank you to everybody that's sort of come through today. I want to actually just shout out that we have folks that have been organizing. We have elders in the space who have been paving the way for many of us, like Miss Janetta that I see on the call right now. We have folks that are youth organizers in the movement that have been doing this work, and we have just a beautiful collection of the generations, I think, of Black trans folks that have been here making a path for all of us, right? So I just want to say thank you to everybody that's put their labor into this movement. I also want to say to everyone is I want us to root ourselves before I kind of introduce what we're kind of doing in this conversation. I want you to take some time in the chat and tell us what made you excited to be here today. So before you all join the call, we as advisors, we as panelists, we as organizers, as part of BTF, we kind of went through and talked about what made us feel hype about today, because we're putting so much of our love and our effort in today, and we know that you all are as well. So what makes you excited to be on this call and to move the work of the Black Trans Fund forward, right? And to support all these different organizations and organizers, okay? Let us know in the chat, let us know in the chat, okay? For those of you that aren't familiar with me, my name is Jay Mace III, as Bree said, and I am the co-director of the Black Trans Prayer Book, as well as an advisor to the Black Trans Fund. And I'm excited to moderate today's panel. And before we kind of get into even the panelists, I want to take you all on a little bit of a journey about how we got here to this point that we're at today, right? And so the Black Trans Fund was in the works for most of 2019. We launched just before the pandemic hit. And because of the deep challenges that we face, Black trans communities have been leaders and innovators in community care, right? This is something all of us know. I always tell people that Black trans folks have been squeezing water from stones for hundreds of years, right? Because we always make a way, right? We have been moving emergency assistance and mutual aid and acting as first responders to our own for years. This type of work has been very difficult to find funding for, right? The pandemic revealed that all communities are at risk and how important these functions are. In many ways, we were better poised to move resources quickly, right? Because we are used to moving these resources, right? And so when we think about this particular work, what's at stake for Black trans communities, right? Many of the organizations we support blend community care and mutual aid with models and develop leadership and power for a stronger Black trans movement. The collapse of gig economies like speaking engagements, consulting work, and restrictions for sex workers have put strain on Black trans-led organizations with low resources and capacity. The stakes have never been higher. Considering the current political state across the country, we are seeing an increase of laws aimed to restrict communities from voting, such as that of Senate Bill 202, which made dramatic alterations to Georgia's absentee voting rules, adding new identification requirements, moving back the request deadline, and criminalizing the distribution of food and drinks to voters waiting in line, except for a self-serve water station that would require voters to leave the line, potentially risking losing their space. We've seen an increase in anti-trans bills that would ban transgender youth from participating in school sports consistent with their gender. From participating in school and sports with their gender, and bills that would deny gender-affirming medical care by a physician and criminalize such care from providers, including counselors, that further puts trans youth and young adults at significant risk of healthcare gaps, right? We've seen an increase in Republican lawmakers in 34 states that have introduced more than 8 anti-protest bills in the 2021 legislative session, following months of civil unrest and ongoing protests against police brutality, which we know will always come back harder on Black folks, and specifically Black trans folks, right? The GOP-controlled legislators in Oklahoma and Iowa have recently passed bills that seek to grant immunity to drivers who strike or injure protesters with their vehicles in public streets during demonstrations. And dozens of states are also considering legislation related to LGBTQ discrimination that will seek to target LGBTQ people with unfair and unequal treatment by creating religious exemptions that will be used to justify anti-LGBTQ discrimination, right? the current political and economic conditions that Black trans communities are facing are nothing new. In fact, the conditions are a lot dire and more strategic than ever before. Conservatives are attempting to use the state to erase and criminalize Black trans people for existing. Despite these tactics, Black trans leaders and organizations are fighting back while holding community with love and care. Okay, let me know in the chat if you're still with me. Let me know in the chat that you're still with me. So the joy and liberation of grantees, right? So we're going to get into, in a second, I'm going to kind of go through all the different folks that we're going to talk to today, and we're going to get to ask them some questions. What I would also offer is we have a little bit of wiggle room. I'm holding my hand up like a little bit of wiggle room. So if you have some questions you want to ask, also feel free to drop them in the chat. If we have time, we might get to them, right? So first, we're going to start with I Am Human. So I Am Human is caring for Black trans communities in the metro Atlanta area, experiencing housing and food insecurities. The needs of this vulnerable and largely forgotten community has only increased due to COVID-19 lockdowns and restrictions. Support from Black Trans Fund allowed I Am Human Foundation Incorporated to unlock additional funds from other foundations that transformed. The Take Resource Center, a leading organization located in the Deep South, is investing in Black trans leaders locally and nationally through their Black Trans Leadership Academy, training members and providing them with tools to fight nasty anti-trans bills being introduced across the country. The Black Excellence Collective is organizing and mobilizing Black trans femmes and queer leaders to fight harassment or criminalization, incarceration issues that Black, queer, and TGNC folks face daily, and they fight on the front line for the collective freedom of all communities. And lastly, but not least, the Black Trans Prayer Book, which is celebrating Black trans people's connection to faith, their interfaith, multidimensional, artistic, and theological work that collects the stories, poems, prayers, meditations, spells, and incantations of Black trans and non-binary people, is seeking to change the conversation from religious communities about Black trans people, right? Okay, and so let's actually introduce the Black Trans Joy and Resistance panel. So this panel exemplifies Black trans leadership from across the country who are leading innovative organizations centering joy and liberation in Black trans communities. Please join me in welcoming Alex Santiago, Daryl Nisha Duncan Boyd, Joshua Allen, and Lady Dame Figueroa Aditi as they speak to the joy and liberation for Black trans communities that BTF invests in. We'll start with hearing from Alex Santiago from I Am Human, and reminding us that in this year, they launched a billboard campaign to protect Black trans women, offered free self-defense training to Black trans women, ran a first responder training for Atlanta police, fire, and ambulatory departments on comprehensive care for trans people, supported Black trans people to obtain legal identification that matches name and gender expression, part of a larger effort to support members impacted by voting laws around identification absentee ballots, and distributed food and clothing. So my first question for Alex Santiago is, Alex, could you share with us a bit more about the impact the Senate Bill 202 will have on Black trans communities that you are currently supporting, and share more about newly implemented programs and campaigns that I Am Human has developed to build community power?
Thank you, Jace. Yes. So as everyone knows that the last election, Georgia kind of, showed out and turned the state blue for the first time, like in forever. And that scared a lot of the local politicians here, because we have a huge gubernatorial and Senate race coming up. So, I believe that this bill was pushed through as fast as it was to make us uncomfortable, so we won't go back out and vote like we did during the presidential election. I can't count the number of people that told me, this was trans folk, that told me that this was the first time that they had ever voted. And I strongly believe that was because they had access to the absentee ballots. So they weren't made to go, in person and be uncomfortable with their IDs not matching the gender, things like that. So I believe that this bill was created to make us uncomfortable, so we'll stay home. But it just gave I Am Human and other organizations like I Am Human, it lit a fire under us to just do more, to make our community comfortable. So we're just going to enhance our gender and ID program that we have right now to help people have identification that matches, their appearance. When it comes to the food and the water not being able to be provided, we're going to have to figure out little ways to get it done. They said you can't give out water, but they didn't say you couldn't sell it. So here's a bottle of water for a penny. Here's a case of water for a dime. We're going to make a way. There's not going to be, if someone who wants to vote, we're going to make it to where they're comfortable in doing that. So they're not stopping anything here. They just gave us a little more ammunition to make sure that our community is taken care of. So as far as that bill is concerned, they give us just, waste of ink on that paper because it's not going to stop us. Not going to stop us. As far as the other programming we have, I have to first make the statement that Black Trans Fund was the very first organization to fund I Am Human. Everyone else thought we were too small, they had never heard of us. So because of the Black Trans Fund and them believing in the vision that we had, we've been able to receive other funding from other organizations and able to extend programming. Recently launched a billboard campaign in January to bring, to raise the awareness or the profile of Black trans folk. There were a couple that were murdered here in Atlanta that I didn't even know about, and that bothered me. So I wanted to bring a different type of awareness. So what better way than, something people are gonna see every day when they're driving down the street. So that's why we implemented the billboard campaign, and that's still going strong right now. We also have a trans sex worker initiative that we have coming up, where we are employing former sex workers to educate current sex workers on how to use their skill sets to start their own businesses. We'll also have GED training, job training, tutoring, different things like that to get them in the workforce. And we also have another initiative for trans-masculine individuals who suffer from dysphoria. We feel like dysphoria is the main reason why a lot of trans-masculine folk won't seek medical attention. So that's a way that we are going to help them feel more comfortable in their bodies by having sensitivity training for physicians, mental health resources for the guys who have signed up for the program, so that we can kind of get ahead on like HIV prevention, teaching them about PrEP and things like that. So that's just a couple of the things we have going on. That's just a couple of programs that we have that we're working on right now. And again, Black Trans Fund is the reason why we're able to do this. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
So thank you. I just want to say really quickly before we move on to our next panelist, just thank you so much for your work and for your labor, and for all that I Am Human is putting together. And just to reaffirm in the ways that that giving a grant or giving funding, especially from other Black trans people, is not just it's not just a one-time gift. It is about that continued belief that you get, because once you get that, and I really appreciate that you shouted that out. Once you get that grant, other grants are easy because there's so many different levels to why we're not believed, not just about our need for survival, but also just to thrive, right? And so just to have that bridge support, I know that means a lot for us over at the Black Trans Prayer Book. And I just really, so I want to shout that out. And just, again, just the comprehensiveness with the way you're able to vision all the different things that your community needs is just masterful. So just thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, okay, yeah. And so please give it up for Alex in the chat. Please give it up for Alex in the chat. We're going to go on to So next, what we're going to do is we're going to actually talk with Daranisha from the Take Resource Center. So, and just to remind people about the work of the Take Resource Center, so the Take Resource Center has hosted their first Black Trans Leadership Academy that has 12 Black trans leaders from across the country, graduating in May 2021. Most instructors are Black trans leaders from various movement sectors. They're partnering with TGIJP to advance the leadership of 10 Black trans-led organizations in Florida with capacity building and support and meeting grants. They've secured 501c4 status to fight local anti-trans legislation and building the organizing capacity and political education of Black trans community in Alabama. And they're fiscally sponsoring 5 Black trans-led organizations. Take is to become the leading fiscal sponsor organization for Black trans-led organizations in the US. So yes, so again, thank you so much for your work. And so question for Daranisha. So Daranisha, how is Take Resource Center organizing and supporting the trans community to fight back against these nasty bills? And how are your leadership development programs building future leaders while being intentional about community care? So can you talk to us a bit about that? Yeah, I know that's a big question, but I know you got it. I know you got it for us today. So let us know.
Thanks so much, everyone, for joining in. I'm super excited to be here on this panel today, and most of all, to talk about the work that Take is doing, but how BTF have supported us along the way. We know that the bills are nasty all across the U.S., and it's no shadow of a doubt what's happening to us or whatever. So during the global pandemic, when everything, my mind just started to turn. And so I was like, I got to do something for my community. I got to be creative. I got to, just step up within my leadership. I know I've been doing this for over 10 years, but what does that really look like to be directly invested into Black trans leadership? And I went struggling back and forth. Should it be for people of color or should it be for Black? And I say it's all type of spaces that's in the world. I talked to 2 of my closest, dearest sisters that helped me make the decision that this needs to be a specific Black trans leadership, invest in our community, and you can do it, dear Anisha. And so I did it. I did just that. I created the, it's what's gonna come out of it is the Monica Roberts Freedom School. Those that don't know, Monica Roberts is very dear to my heart. Monica Roberts was the person that told me not to leave Birmingham, Alabama. You got it, sister. You're going to be able to flip Birmingham, Alabama blue, and it's going to be a blue state. You're going to have to not worry about anything anymore. And I kept on saying, sister, I don't think I can do it. I need to move on. I need to go somewhere else, find another job because this is not working for me. So it was my pleasure to create this school that I'm building out now, which will be the Monica Roberts Freedom School that will house the Owning Our Power Black Trans Leadership cohort, which is made up, I know we said 12, but we originally had 16 student leaders to get accepted. We had over 25 to apply, and only 14 of them will get the opportunity to graduate. And of course, we understand that it is rules and regulations anywhere you go, and we had to have rules in place in order to support those that have been successful, that have made all the Zoom meetings, and we know it's kind of hard to basically move things around, and especially when it comes to Zoom. But we ask everyone in the beginning to make a commitment to be here, to move around your schedules. It's only once a month. And if you felt like you can do it, we ask you to apply. And so it'll be unfair to those that participated the whole while to allow others to graduate that miss over 3 or 4 of the sessions. That's unfair. With the Leadership Academy, we're basically providing them with tools around organizational development, leadership development, and personal growth and self-care and love and healing within the actual human being that's doing the work. And I think the Black Transform around fund around joy and liberation, that's what this leadership cohort is all about. Because still at the end of the day, when we're doing the work, we're getting so burnt out and we don't have anyone to count on, to call on, a shoulder to lean on. But if we teach people to do the work with joy and liberation, and also know that it's okay to take time to yourself and heal and center yourself and understand that self-care is important doing the work, we won't have so many burnouts or whatever. And that's something that I failed to teach myself 10 plus years doing this work. And I got to a point where I felt like I need to throw in the towel. And I think it resonated with me once Monica passed away. It was something that was different, because we was all in the place of planning for this actual cohort to take place. And I started receiving these texts saying that Monica had passed. And I instantly just stopped. I was driving my car and I just started just crying, and I was texting my two sisters that told me, to make this a Black cohort, like people are telling me that Monica died. People are telling me that Monica died. Please tell me it's not true. I don't want to look at her Facebook page or whatever. And so it did something to me that say that was Monica's way of telling me that I can carry the torch without her. Because she knew I was going to be calling her, and I had already started writing her and just telling her about the things that I wanted to do or whatever. And so I'm really excited to have this cohort graduating just in a few weeks, and it means so much to me. And the reason why I'm so intentional about Black leadership is because when I needed help, I only had a couple people to call on. But I think that if we can come together as a community and do this work, we can be really advanced in our leadership, and we can bring our youth along with us. Even though these nasty bills are there to attack our youth, at least that you will have people like me, Janetta, Bree, our ancestors, our transcestors, to carry this torch and continue to make sure that our youth don't have to go through the things that we went through. And so I'm very grateful for this opportunity. And I just want people to continue to support Black trans leadership and give your dollars, because it's nothing like doing work and being drained and exhausting because you have to work in 3 and 4 different positions at one time. I'm on this call here now. Doing this call, I had my camera off because I was in the process of trying to act as the payroll person and processing payroll and getting things in. So it's very important to support Black trans leadership, because the infrastructures within our organization is not like your typical nonprofit industrial.
Yes, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Yes, thank you for that. So you spoke so much about what you envision for Black trans youth as a whole. You spoke a bit about how Monica inspired you, about even just keeping your work and staying, particularly in Alabama and in the South. What do you imagine? And so, the thing that I think stuck out to me the most is how you said there's some things that, in your time in organizing that you didn't get to think about for yourself around self-care or other sort of stuff. What do you specifically want for Black trans leaders as a whole to experience that are part of the movement that are coming behind you?
Mm-hmm. What I want for Black trans leaders to come behind me is simple: to know that this work is emotional, and take care of yourself. Because if you don't take care of yourself, you're going to be dead and gone, and somebody else is going to be trying to hold your weight, and they're going to continue to try to do the movement work that needs to be done. And I want to uplift one other thing, that we'll be in Virginia Beach for graduation next week. We'll be there for 5 days, but we will be there for 5 days intentional, because the way I built out this agenda, that when people start coming in on that Thursday, that self-care is available for you. You can go to the beach, you can get a massage, you can get a facial, like whatever that look like. And it's a treat on the Monica Roberts Freedom School. We want to let you know to get some relaxation in, love on yourself. Of course, we got a curriculum there. We know that they got 2 other sessions they have to complete or whatever. But other than that, we're very intentional about the work, and we want to make sure that we share our knowledge. Because if we don't share our knowledge, then you'll have another Daranisha that's trying to do the work, just trying to figure everything out. Those that say they support you don't really support you. People that post to show up for you are not showing up for you. But if you have people that are in place, like the instructors that are within the actual cohort, these are people that this is a longevity relationship. So we told them, once you graduate on May the 22nd, that don't mean stop calling us, that don't mean stop emailing us, and that doesn't mean stop messaging us. We are here for the long haul. Until you get it right, until you're able to serve community the best way you know how, we're here. We're committed to that. And you know, and it ain't all about being paid, because I already told the instructors that once we signed on here, you're committed. So if you can't be committed, I don't need you. I don't need you a part of this team. And all the instructors, believe it or not, all the instructors told me they was willing to work for me at the academy for free. And that spoke volume about my leadership. That I'm calling 10 different people, asking them to do something for me. And they told me, oh, I understand, you know, if it's not any money in the budget, I want to do this for free. And I have to uplift Cecilia Gentili, because she's the only person of color that's a part of the leadership instructors. And when I was talking to her about it, she said, oh, whatever, sister, I got you. Don't worry. I'll do it for free. And I'm like, girl, don't do it for free. And I asked her, how did she feel about being in a predominant Black space? And she said, I have nothing but love and respect for you, all of y'all, and I will follow y'all leadership wherever. You just tell me what you need me to do. And I knew then that she was the right person to be a part of the team.
So thank you for that. Is Cecilia on the call right now today too?
I don't know.
I'm like, if Cecilia, because Cecilia is another person I'd like to shout out, because Cecilia is just a down person. I love Cecilia so much. Like, I know Cecilia from afar, but Cecilia has done so much work for so many people, including I know myself in the world. And so I just appreciate Cecilia so much. So thank you again for your discernment. Thank you for your testimony today. Thank you so much for again your work and your brilliance and your leadership, right? So again, can we thank Darrenisha in the chat for all that she brought to just to this moment, and just the work that we know that you have been doing and will be continuing to do. So thank you so much for your commitment to this work. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, and so what we're gonna do is we're actually gonna move to, so next up, let me know if y'all still with us and y'all still rocking with Black trans leadership and Black trans folks in the Black Trans Fund right now. Let us know in the chat if you're still with all of us. We're gonna move from Darrenisha on to Joshua from the Black Excellence Collective. And so just as a reminder for folks not familiar with the Black Excellence Collective or need a reminder about some of the work that they've been doing, so Black Excellence Collective has provided programming around COVID mutual aid campaigns, COVID stimulus mini grants for high-risk folks, people with disabilities, people who are HIV positive, folks who are elders and the uninsured. Specifically has done a lot of work around incarceration and the persecution of police violence, and understand persecution and police violence prevents people from taking action for fear of long-term jail sentences and felonies, as well as specific work around trans women and femmes being detained with cis men, and trying to work on, and understand the risk that puts them for physical and sexual assault. So thank you, Joshua Allen, for your work. And so my first question for you is, could you share more about the work of the collective and how anti-riot bills being proposed across the country impact your work and put collective members at further risk for criminalization?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the question. But first, I just wanted to say how happy I am to be here in this conversation today. And thank you so much to my colleagues and my friends who have shared so much already. Being a part of the Black Trans Funds board since last year and coming into this year has been an exceptional experience for me, because so many of us were already friends, right? We were already working together. We already have storied histories of calling each other, asking for support, and trying to kind of figure out how to do effective work to resource our communities and support our communities in times of need. Prior to COVID, prior to the massive uprisings, we were already doing this work before. And so I just want to say thank you. It's an honor to be in community and family with you all. I love you, and I'm so proud of the work that our community is doing. So thanks for that introduction. My name is Joshua Allen. I'm an activist and organizer. I'm one of the founders of the Black Excellence Collective. I also serve as a member of the board of advisors here at the Black Trans Fund, grant making panelist at Resist. And currently I'm actually also building out a mentorship program here in New York as activists and residents at the LGBT Center. So I really resonate with those, with the sentiments of Daranisha about the importance of mentorship for our younger communities. Addressing more specifically the question about the bills that have been coming up lately and the work that we've been doing in the Black Excellence Collective, a lot of the anti-rioting bills, they serve the purpose of really terror, of trying to instill fear in our communities and to threaten us with a sense of punishment so that we don't take action. This is something that I've experienced personally back in the summer of last year, actually, and it was kind of one of the experiences that spurred my leadership in our campaign this past year, was the curfew in New York during our protests and uprisings for Black lives, specifically for Black trans lives here in the city. There was a curfew instituted here in New York City at 8 p.m. for the first time in 73 years. And so there was, of course, no curfew for COVID, no curfew for the many, many issues that were plaguing our city, but there was a curfew for people peacefully protesting for a better future for ourselves and the generations to come after. F that curfew and F New York City government too. I was outside at 8:01 p.m. and marching all night long. Myself and many of my colleagues in the Black Excellence Collective were as well. And we were arrested. 200, we were a part of a mass arrest of over 200 people. And myself and a couple other members of the Black Excellence Collective were arrested. And of course, while we were there, while we're being detained, we're misgendered, put in men's cells. And thank God we were not I personally did not feel like I was at risk of assault or danger from the people I was incarcerated with. It was actually the police and the officers who I was most concerned about. So I think I was in jail for like 16 hours and I was in there for the longest. So no one was in there for over 24 hours. But I think after we all got out, and I'm sharing this story because of the post question about the anti-riot bills, right? I think that what we all discussed with each other was, if not now, then when? And if not us, then who? Who is going to be the one to carry on this fight? And so we just committed to each other that we were going to stay sustained and committed in this movement, that we were going to stay down, that we weren't going to let the fear mongering that the government and police forces produce via the media and through their policies, we're not going to let that deter us or stop us from fighting for the future that we believe in. And so the impact, most directly, the impact has been the fear and the terror that it's sought to instill in our community. But the result has been a more fortified fight, a doubled down commitment to not only continue to fight, but also to protect each other. And so that's really been a motivating force for our mutual aid campaign, for our protest relief fund, et cetera. It's fueled our work and not stopped us.
So, and this is part because of, what you just shared, but also just because I know I'm familiar with your work, just because, especially when we're talking about some of the folks who, at least that I've got to see as a youth organizer in the world and doing all these things, you've been in it for a minute, right? So even as one of the younger folks on the panel, how, just for folks that maybe have not yet connected Black trans liberation work with abolition work, how is abolition work connected to your vision of Black trans liberation?
Absolutely. And thank you for offering that question. So yeah, I'm 25 now, and I've been organizing like hardcore since I was 15 years old. So this last year, I hit my 10-year mark, and I'm really excited about it. Abolition has been a part of my life since I was a kid. I grew up in an abolitionist family, and I want people to understand that there is no future with Black trans liberation or Black liberation more larger that includes all of us without abolition. We need ways to redefine how we keep each other safe, how we take care of each other, and how we protect one another. And that simply cannot include carceral systems. We need spaces of transformation, of healing, and most importantly, in this called resources. We need resources. It's resources, it's education, it's access to food, fresh water, healthy environments, housing, healthy family units. These are the things that keep us safe. Not just youth, not just adults, not just elders, but all of humanity. These basic resources that the earth has already provided us with is precisely what keeps us safe. And that's why we need an abolitionist future, one that looks more towards nature, towards love, healing, transformation, resources, and abundance. is what's going to get us towards a future with liberation. And I really want to encourage people on this call, my colleagues and funders, to lean into that work, to resource our communities. And echoing, I don't remember who said it earlier. I'm sure we all kind of referenced it at some point earlier in the phone call, but it's really important that we realize that our communities have been doing this for not hundreds, but thousands of years here in this settler colony and all across the globe. It is time now for funders to turn out their pockets, to resource this work that we've been doing for so long. Just like Jay May said earlier, we're squeezing water out of rocks, and we shouldn't have to do that anymore. We provided a groundwork. We're fighting on top of a legacy that is so much bigger than all of us. So it's time for us now to take action, to turn out our pockets, and to make the change that we need to see.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Joshua Allen. I'm hoping that we'll get to hear from all of y'all. I think we got enough time that we're going to hear from all of y'all again. So I'm watching time. 100 Day got me on lock with the time stuff. So also shout out to 100 Day for keeping me on time. That is not my skill set at all. Not my skill set at all. So can we again thank Joshua Allen? So let's thank Joshua Allen in the chat. Okay. And so from Joshua, we're going to move. To one of my besties in the world. So one of my besties, so I feel a little, I feel grateful to get to introduce this person, but my sister in the movement, my sister in this life, just one of my favorite, one of my favorite writers, one of my favorite performers, but also just one of my favorite people, Lady Dan Figueroa Aditi, who is also co-director of the Black Trans Prayer Book. And so the Black Trans Prayer Book, for people that are not familiar with it as a whole, and just as a reminder, is what we do is we create resources for Black trans folks to heal from religious trauma, as well as to hold religious institutions accountable for the violence that they perpetuate. We understand religious violence, and specifically violent, white supremacist theologies, to be at the roots of the violence that Black trans people experience, that bleeds out into the political sphere, that bleeds out into the ways that we experience violence, domestic violence, sexual violence, street violence, financial violence, and all those other things, right? And so I want to welcome Lady Dane to the space. And I would love for you to talk about the creation and ideology of the Black Trans Prayer Book, and the release of the book, and what our future plans are for the project. So if you can talk about future plans for what is the relevance of the Black Trans Prayer Book? What do we see in the future, like 5 years from now, all of that.
I love you. Shout out to Bree, to the team, to all the other panelists. It is really great to be here. And for the sake of transparency, listen, y'all. So I got my second shot yesterday. My second shot. And baby, listen, she is carrying, okay? So baby, normally doing a presentation like this, I'd be like, yes, improv, bullet points. But I had to write some shit down. Oh shit, can I cuss? Oh look, oh my God.
You already did it.
I had to write some things down. So Lady Dane Figueroa Aditi, my pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm the co-director, along with Jay Mace III of the Black Trans Prayer Book. And I am a Black, Cuban, Nigerian, Indigenous, trans woman, performance artist, advocate, priestess, healer, writer, etc. And I grew up in a family with a Muslim father from Nigeria and a Christian evangelist mother. And I myself, one of the paths that I practice is the Lukumi path, which can trace its roots to Nigeria by way of through Cuba. And so, yes, growing up, religion and art and Black history were deeply, deeply important to me and in the shaping of my ideas around Indigenous sovereignty and Black liberation. And I understood that art itself was spiritual. So I do not believe that there is a separation between artistic expression and spiritual manifestation. J. Mace III and I started this project because we noticed that those most impacted by systematic and interpersonal violence were Black, Brown, and Indigenous trans peoples, while the media only discussed transphobia from a framework that centered a white trans experience, unless it was for entertainment. And even then, it was packaged as trauma porn. And ain't nobody got time for that. Even now, we are finding that the few conversations within mainstream media about the current anti-trans bills being passed around the country, there is still very little linkage to the fact transphobia is born from a white supremacist religious framework and inherently carries with it anti-Blackness and racism. To us, it is impossible to separate conversations about transphobia from conversations about race and the economic violence faced by Black trans people. We come from a framework that understands Black trans people are more than deserving, period, poo. The Black Trans Prayer Book is specifically working to end violence that targets Black trans people through the creation of healing retreats, literature, workshops, artistic tools, and now a film. We seek to create a world that makes space for the fullness of Black people, cis and trans. We understand that in order for this to manifest, there must be, one, places for us to be honest about white supremacist theologies and their impact. Two, space in which dialogue centers Black trans liberation theology. Three, places for Black trans people to heal from being the targets of violence. Ultimately, we are working towards a world that is completely free of oppression. We are cultivating a world in which there is a deep understanding of the ancestral legacy of Black trans folk within Black liberation. We imagine spiritual and religious traditions free from trans antagonism and a country and world free from the legal, interpersonal, and communal violence that manifests. After the successful completion of our flagship book project, the first of its kind, honey, on Black trans liberation theologies, we have moved into making a feature-length documentary centered on the lives and spiritual work of at least 15 Black trans folks. The interfaith and beyond faith work follows individuals who are steeped in African traditionalist religions, Abrahamic religions, Eastern traditions, and those who are either agnostic or feel pushed out from faith communities altogether. We know this will be a tool of immense learning, history, and healing for many. And while I am here, please know that the money we get goes directly into the pockets of Black trans people, okay? Thank you.
So
That's all I have written down. That's all I have written down.
Listen, I was struggling to find the little mute button. Yeah, so no, thank you for that. And so I guess the last little piece, and I think you mentioned maybe some of this in there. What do you see happening for the Black Trans Prayer Book in the next couple of years or so? Yeah, what you got cooking right now?
Oh my goodness. Oh my gosh, so much. So one thing that we have cooking is that, after the documentary is done, we actually want to start an institute that helps to facilitate ways to, oh my gosh, that's my iPad. I did put my silent, but my iPad is also
we can't even hear it.
Don't judge me. Y'all are like, ooh, shade. We're going to create a media institute that actually helps our siblings, our community, and our colleagues be able to actually talk about a Black trans liberation theology within the media. And of course, we want to continue doing a lot of our healing retreats. Our first healing retreat was so transformative and so inspirational. And I'll say this because part of what we're talking about today, right, is about funding and how important it is for our organizations. Like what we had noticed in the past is that oftentimes doing conferences, it'd be like, oh, you know, the conference would want to invite you to the conference, a Black trans person to the conference, but you, Black trans person, have to actually pay for your travel, your food, your housing. And also a lot of times you're having to take off of work in order to attend the conference. And so when we did our first healing retreat, it was deeply important for us to make sure that there was no barriers to the 15 Black trans people who were invited to the healing retreat around money. So the Black Trans Prayer Book paid for travel, cars to and fro, everyone's dinner, and everyone's hotel. And so we would like to also, along with our media institute, to also do more of our healing retreats.
Good stuff. Thank you for that, Lady Dane Figueroa Aditi, right? So everyone thank Lady Dane Figueroa Aditi, or Lady Dane, for her time, for her brilliance, all of that. Yeah, and so we're actually going to transition out of the panel a little bit, but before we do that, I want to actually have a quick question for all the panelists. Very, very quick question. So the notes here say to me very quickly, got one sentence. So you got one sentence to answer this in. And I would love to ask the panelists in one sentence or less, if you got one word, that's cool too. What is bringing you the most Black trans joy these days? So what is bringing you the most Black trans joy these days?
I'll go first. Since Darrenisha is on the panel, I would like to say that what is bringing me joy right now is that I am valedictorian of her Leadership Academy at the graduation next week. So I am super, super, super excited about that. So it's bringing me a lot of Black trans joy.
Yes, love it, yes.
Congratulations. I'll go second if you all will allow me. What's bringing me, I kind of referenced it earlier, but it's like we've been doing this work for so long and it's been unrecognized. And so seeing my friends, my colleagues, my family finally getting their flowers, finally getting their acknowledgement, it's bringing me so much joy. So much joy. So I'm really happy about that.
And I will have to say what's bringing me joy these days is that the hope that I had for tomorrow, I can finally see it. If that kind of makes sense to you. I didn't know where this road was gonna lead me. I just had hope that one day we'll be here, and just to be here and see so much Black trans brilliance, it's unbelievable.
Yes.
Yes. And so just real quick, y'all, I don't know if y'all know, but Darrenisha actually came up to DC and saw my show like 2 years ago. Oh my gosh, I love you so much. And so for me, it's, you know, understanding that it's watching the ways in which Black trans people recognize that we recognize and honoring our ancestral legacy of resistance, and also that we do not have to buy into a white supremacist productivity model, that we actually can prioritize our rest and our care for one another. And so that is something in this moment that is bringing me joy. So.
Mashallah. Yes. Thank you. Can you give it up one more time for all of our panelists? Give it up in the chat for all of our panelists and all this brilliance. You know, all the applause, all the verbal applause, all the everything that you need. Okay, all of it. Okay. Mashallah. Thank y'all so much. Thank y'all so much. So as we transition into our next piece, and before I hand it off to Bree in a couple minutes, I want to actually offer us a quick grounding, if that's okay with folks. I don't know if you're feeling it, but I'm feeling all kinds of energy. I got all kinds of lightning coming through my veins right now. I got some really hype feelings, and so I want us to be able to channel that for a few minutes. So if people have the capacity to entertain me and channel this for a few minutes, I would like for you to try to be wherever you are, be as comfortable wherever you are. You don't have to be, you could be sitting, you could be standing, you could be whatever positionality that you want to be, but just be someplace where you can feel your muscles relax as much as possible for right now. So just try to allow yourself to, your muscles to relax a little bit. Okay, and we're going to do a quick breathing exercise. Then I'm going to ask you to do something in the chat. Okay, so take a deep breath in, hold it, take a deep breath out, take a deep breath in, hold it, take a deep breath out, take a deep breath in, hold it, take a deep breath out. And keep breathing. As you're breathing, imagine that there is a warmth that is starting in your belly, and that this warmth is also a light, and that as you continue breathing, it keeps expanding bigger, bigger, and bigger. And as it expands, you feel more loved than you've ever felt, more comfort than you've ever known. And at some point, this light and this warmth is reaching from the tip of your toes to the top of your crown. And it keeps expanding. And the energy keeps expanding. And it's also in the room with you and filling the room with you. And it's just sending you all of the care that you need to continue this work, to continue this mission. And it's wanting to help you vision. It's wanting to help you build something. It's giving you the tools that you need to build. When you think about this world free from oppression, this world in which equity is real, this world in which Black trans liberation is realized, what tools do you need? What does it look like? What does that world move like? What does that world feel like? Take a deep breath in, hold it, take a deep breath out, take a deep breath in, hold it, take a deep breath out, take one more deep breath in, take another deep breath out. And when you're ready, let us know in the chat, what does a world that is prepared for Black trans liberation feel like, look like? How does that manifest? What does a more equitable world, a fully realized equitable world look like for you? And just type that into the chat. And Darrenisha said, free, all of it, free, 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 free. Yes. Listening to Black trans folks. Empowered, yes. Curiosity replaces fear, okay, yes. Radical compassion and love. Investment, yes, investment, all caps, yes. Free of capitalism, yes, free of capitalism, yes. A world where everyone can thrive and live beautiful, fulfilling lives. Yes, Black trans freedom funders have an abundance of resources, abundance, yes. Peace and no need to police our thoughts, bodies, communities, etc. Yes, yes, mashallah, yes. All Black trans folks are safe and supported to let your lights shine, yes. No barriers to access to basic human resources, yes. Real true equality acts across all. Okay, yes. Good stuff, good stuff. An abundant love, abundant resources, sustainable, restful, full of joy. Yes, I love that, sustainable. Love, good stuff, good stuff. Yes, y'all can keep filling in the chat. I just also want to say, so as a Black trans person, as a Black trans Muslim, you know, also that having this conversation during Eid time is also very magical for me about what does Black trans liberation look like. So I'm really grateful for that. And with that, and I see Hunter Day is lovingly telling me that we are, my portion is out of time. It's out of time. It's out of time. And so I want to pass it on to the wonderful visionary, to the magical, and to the empowering Bree Ann Rivera to take us further on. Yes.
Lovingly. Thank you so much, Jay Mays. Yeah, and thank you, panelists, for actually pulling my energy from deep within. I felt like I fumbled the opening because I could hear all of the folks joining. And so like people, technology can sometimes be transphobic. So I was waiting for my headphones to die, but I'm back now. But yeah, really wanting to thank the panelists for sharing their work with us and really wanting to share with folks the advisors for our Black Trans Fund. It was very important for us to pull together a group of 7 Black trans, gender nonconforming, non-binary community members to actually help shape the vision and the ideology of Black Trans Fund. And so Black Trans Fund is not only making meaningful grants to Black trans communities, but we're also building the grant making muscles of our advisors to actually invest in the future of Black trans grant makers. And so one of the things that was really key to me in putting together this group of advisors, actually I learned from Alex. Last year when we did an interview for funding, I remember Alex saying to me that he didn't feel like Black Trans Fund was a space for him because he didn't see himself within the fund because I was the lead. And so really just listening to community and really being thoughtful of like, what does it mean to build out a fund that actually supports all Black trans communities? That means that all Black trans communities need to be involved in the decision-making. So we have a diverse group of Black trans leaders who are actually helping shape this historic fund. And so these advisors all came together last year and helped curate our first core docket, which includes 10 Black trans-led organizations from all across the country. We also gave those groups, along with their $20,000 grants, money to pay fiscal sponsor fees, because we know that Black trans communities get shortchanged a lot of times in philanthropy, especially those groups that are fiscally sponsored. So it was important for this group and the leadership of Black Trans Fund to give Black trans community the same amount of money that we said that we were going to give them. So really wanting to shout out the advisors for being visionaries and making that happen. And then, you know, the advisors also helped create our grant making criteria, which includes a couple of key components. One, really wanting to invest in organizations with budgets under $1 million. Also, the advisory committee really got specific about like, what did we mean by Black trans-led organizations? And so for us, Black Trans Fund supports organizations with 75% or more of the leadership and membership is made up of Black trans folks. And then, you know, our advisors also got really clear around some of the politics that we would need to hold very closely in order for us to build out a fund that is surrounded in joy and liberation. And so for us, Black Trans Fund does not fund any Black trans-led group that participates in anti-Blackness, transphobia, or organizations or leaders that commit harm to community members. So I'm super excited to be able to uplift the advisors, Eli Drew, Xavier, Joshua Allen, Aaron Lang, Monica Jones, Jay, and Jay Mace III. 2 of them are our panelists, so super excited about that. Next slide, please. And so this is a surprise for the advisors, but we had this photo commissioned by one of the members of the Groundswell staff, and just really wanting to name that, like, we did this work together. We created a national fund that has the back of all Black trans communities. We see our communities for who they are because we come from those communities, and we are laying the blueprint for how philanthropy should center and support Black trans joy and liberation. And so super excited to share this amazing piece of artwork that, yeah, speaks to the joy and liberation that our advisors bring to the fund every day. We all look good too. And so now, really want to talk about Black Trans Fund theory of change. So we talked to the grantees, we heard a little bit about how Black Trans Fund was created, but really want to talk about like how we are going to do this work in centering joy and liberation in Black trans communities. And so for our theory of change, our grant making is our North Star. And our grant making leads how we transform the field. And for us, we fund and center mutual aid efforts. And that's one of our key components of strategy, because we know that several Black trans community leaders and organizations have been asking for mutual aid support even before the pandemic. And so for us, we're very clear that there is no way that we could move any community into a place of effective organizing if we don't first meet their immediate needs. And so for us, making sure that organizations have access to dollars to move directly to community members to help them support their most basic needs is a key component of how Black trans communities organize. And we are also removing a lot of the barriers that Black trans organizations face when it comes to getting meaningful funding. And one of the ways that we do that is by allowing our advisory committee to make grant determinations, because we're very clear that we are very close to the work that's happening within a lot of Black trans-led organizations. And it feels sometimes disrespectful to have to go as Black trans leaders to non-Black communities, non-Black trans communities, to actually like convince them of our work. And so a key component of for us around like lifting up the barriers is just putting Black trans leaders in charge of everything that we do. And then also, I mentioned it earlier, you know, we pay fiscal sponsor fees for our groups. It's a key component of the work that we're doing. Very clear that like Black trans communities pay the trans tax, which means we pay double for everything in the world. And so BTF would not be able to live into our vision and values of joy and liberation without actually paying for fiscal sponsor fees. And very happy to announce that we are now starting to see more organizations who are actually paying fiscal sponsor fees because they now understand the importance of how that transforms communities. Shout out to Third Wave. And then our grant making informs how we build capacity with all of the Black trans-led organizations that we support. And so our capacity building programs are really rooted in cultural competency. Super excited to announce that this year we are in partnership with the Transgender Strategy Center to help our grantees build capacity within their organizations. And we will be providing organizations with capacity building offerings, TA support, and coaching. Very clear that, you know, this year has been a monumental fundraising year for a lot of Black trans-led organizations, and really want to help them build capacity so that all of the new and emerging organizations can continue to provide the service to communities even after pandemic giving dwindles down. And so our capacity building, informed by our grant making, informs how we talk to philanthropy. And we call it philanthropic organizing. Sounds super fancy. But, you know, we transform philanthropy in the ways in which we organize with funders and donors. A couple of ways that we do that is, one, BTF has an ambassador program that we will be sharing more about later in the presentation, where we are working very closely with folks in philanthropy to educate folks on the actual needs of Black trans communities, how philanthropy can intervene, and making sure that like Black Trans Fund and other philanthropic organizations are unlocking as much resources and support to Black trans communities. One of the things that I really wanted to name too, that's a really important piece of our philanthropic organizing, is the narrative shifting that we are also doing within Black trans communities. We center Join Liberation because there are tons of stories of Black trans, about Black trans violence and discrimination. And we know as Black trans leaders that that's not how Black trans communities are actually moved, right? It's really from a place of like joy and liberation and being able to provide those resources to community that actually moves us, from a place of not being active and involved to a place of like showing up and showing out. And so for us, just really wanting to name that new world building would not be actually possible without centering joy and liberation. And to be honest, I don't want to invest in any new world building that doesn't center joy and liberation, because we're going to be right back in the same place that we are now, which is messy and mixy. And so just really wanting to name that as well. And then a key piece of the narrative shifting is actually allowing Black trans community to get their autonomy back. A lot of times as Black trans leaders, we have to figure out innovative ways in order for us to get the attention of funders and donors, and being very clear that the work that BTF supports within organizations is the same work that other philanthropic organizations support. We just come from it from a place of joy and liberation, which actually unlocks a lot more possibilities for Black trans leaders to be able to do the work that's actually important to their community members. That's our theory of change that I just shared with you all now. And I'm super excited to actually just announce and share with you all our vision for BTF's 5-year plan. Shout out to Wynn, Groundswell's communication director, for hearing my vision and creating something so beautiful. Technology is being transphobic and taking forever. Okay, here it is, boom. And so earlier I really talked about the pyramids and how integral that, that imagery is to the vision and development of BTF. And so what other way to talk about how BTF plans to grow in the next 5 years than to actually build a pyramid? And so, oh no, we lost it. Hopefully it comes back. And so for us, part of our key indicators of success of building out this pyramid and getting us to 2024, which will be our spinoff year, is really being intentional about seeding and supporting Black trans leadership. And how we will do that is by moving $3.5 million to the field, right? And then using some of that criteria that I mentioned earlier with the focus on organizations with budgets under $1 million. We also want to make sure that like our organizations are coming from diverse geographic locations and represent the diversity that shows up within Black trans communities. And we will do this work through our grant making, capacity building, and through grant making partnerships, which I will talk about later in this slide. We're also, another key indicator of success for us is developing ambassadors. And we want to develop 100, which could be grantees, funders, or advisors, right? And we really want those ambassadors to really speak to the joy, thriving, and liberation that Black trans communities experience with meaningful funding from philanthropic organizations. And so we also do this work with the help of our 7 amazing advisors. And last but not least, you know, one of the key components of success for BTF is to raise $5 million. And for us, knowing that each year, as we move from 2020 to 2024, that our fundraising goal is $1 million each year for us to get to that 5 million mark. and, you know, really wanting to move 15 or more major donors to help us invest in long-term Black trans liberation. And so now I'm actually going to walk through some high-level goals for each of our years that we have planned out. And we framed out each year with a theme. And so really briefly wanting to talk about each year and its framing. 2020 was a monumental year for BTF, which was our year of vision. We were visioning and figuring it out. But we launched the first Black Trans-led fund in the middle of a pandemic. Didn't think that was going to happen. And, you know, we distributed $450,000 to the field through multiple grant making opportunities. One with a deep partnership with Groundswell's Rapid Response Fund, and the other through our core portfolio docket, where we also paid fiscal sponsor fees for the organizations that were fiscally sponsored. We put together an amazing group of 7 Black trans leaders from across the country, and they helped curate our docket and helped us get clear on our vision and our ideology. Black Trans Fund was able to raise $1.2 million last year to support our operation costs, future grant making, and capacity building. And then I just really want to name that, like, we wouldn't have got to that $1.2 million if it wasn't for the 1,300 funders and donors that supported Black Trans Fund with donations between $50 to $500. And we are in the midst of 2021, which is our year of capacity building, and really wanting to name each year. The Black Trans Fund has a goal of increasing the amount of money that we move to the field by 10%. And we know with those increases, that also means that each year that we will up the amount of money that we are fundraising to make sure that we are able to support Black trans communities in a steady way as we continue to grow. The biggest announcement, the biggest 2 announcements in 2021 is one, we're actually expanding our grant making. And so with our core portfolio grantees and mutual aid offerings that we'll be providing to the community, we're also entering into unique grant making partnerships that will allow BTF to provide organizations with a grant to move to organizations that we normally would not be able to support. So that's new and emerging organizations and organizations with without 501c3 or fiscal sponsor status, and new groups. That's part of our commitment of, like, really building out Black trans leadership. And how do we expect to do that if we're only investing in organizations that we know and that are very visible? Part of our capacity building in 2021 too will also include our partnership with the Transgender Strategy Center that I'm super excited about, that will help us deepen and further develop capacity building programs for Black trans-led organizations. We are also, our advisors this year have also signed on to be our advisory committee for our mutual aid grant making that we'll be doing throughout this entire year. Our next mutual aid RFP round will actually be released tomorrow. Super excited to get that out into the field. And then as we move up the pyramid and we continue to build, we move into 2022, which is our year of arts and culture. And so, of course, increase in grant making, increase in fundraising. But the key component of our year of arts and culture is for BTF to partner with arts and culture grant-making organizations to offer TA support to support Black trans-led organizations in their art and culture work. This is a very key component of the work that BTF wants to move, because arts and culture is a very important part of how Black trans communities organize. And so we really wanted to invest time and energy and resources in helping develop arts and culture programs. And then as we move into 2023, which is a year of narrative shifting. So since the beginning until, well, actually, as we continue to grow at BTF, a key component of our work is the narrative shifting, right? We really want to shift how Black trans communities are talked about, not only within philanthropy, but in the world in general. And so for our for our narrative shifting year, we will develop and launch a campaign for Black trans liberation and joy that will be co-designed by our grantees. Yeah, super excited to be able to take the stories that I know and that I know to be true since the beginning of my activism, and actually use those stories to transform not only how philanthropy and the world talks about Black trans community, but also how Black trans communities are resourced. And then we do the capacity building, we do the arts and culture, we do the narrative shifting, and then we get to 2024, which is our year of celebration and reflection. And the most key component of that year is us launching a report that uplifts the innovation, vision, and opportunities of Black trans-led organizations across the country, and really wanting to speak to the strengths of these organizations and how Black trans leaders have been on the front lines of collective liberation and freedoms for all communities, not just Black trans communities. And as you see at the top of the pyramid, we shining, right? And that means we're ready to spin off. And so a key component of BTF being incubated at Groundswell is for us to eventually spin off, to live into our values of being a fully run Black trans-led fund. And so super excited to be able to get there, and just really wanted to name a couple of key components that we would be able to look at to be able to assess that BTF is actually ready to spin off. One of the biggest components is for us to have an operating reserve of 6 months to a year. Really wanting to name that, like, we are very clear that, like, as we're building out this fund, that we would like to make steady, small growth as we continue to grow and support Black trans communities, but also knowing that with pandemic giving, reaching a plateau, and with all of the new and emerging organizations that have really flagged capacity building as a key component of their organizational health and success, that we would need an operating reserve of at least 6 months to a year for us to be able to provide the same level of support to Black trans communities that we've been supporting. And then another key component of the spinoff indicators is for us to secure our own 501c3. Super excited about that, because then that allows Black Trans Fund to be able to exist in the world and be able to allow Black trans leaders to actually take the reins, and it helps saturate the philanthropic field with more Black trans leaders and grant makers. And so this beautiful graphic will be included in a follow-up email for folks to be able to look at a little bit more deeply and share with other folks within philanthropy. But just really wanting to name that there was a lot of like thoughtfulness that went into this 5-year plan, and how BTF and Black trans leaders plan on transforming the philanthropic field. So thank you so much. Cool. I believe we are at time, almost.
This is great. Thank you, Bree. I think we have a few moments for questions. Is that right?
We
So
do.
if there's any
Yeah.
one or two questions that folks want to, and I know Evelyn, you've been monitoring the, checking the chat. And see all the love in the chat, Bree.
Yeah, I've been seeing all the love. Everybody been loving on BTF, on me, on the panelists. So yes, appreciate all of the love. And know that this isn't the only space that folks can pose or ask questions. Yes. Seeing a lot of familiar faces in the chat. Appreciate all of the love.
And I'll just hop in to say that I haven't seen any questions, but just lots of love for Bree and the panelists. So whenever folks have a chance to check that out, please do.
Well, maybe in the meantime, while folks think on questions, we can pass it over to Julia, and then she can introduce herself and share more about the ambassador and ways that funders and donors can take action.
Yes, thank you so much. Can we just take a moment? Can we take a moment and just sit with the incredible vision that Bree and the advisors and the panelists have shared? I am so deeply inspired. Bree, I've been inspired by you and your visionary leadership ever since we first connected when you were leading Trans Sisters of Color Collective in Detroit. And just really grateful to be here today. My name is Julia Beatty. My pronouns are she and her, and I direct the Black Led Movement Fund at Borealis Philanthropy. And just been so honored to be able to be one of the first funders in to be able to support this work. Bree, you first as an organizer, like I said, and now as a resource mobilizer for this historic fund, which is the first and only funding vehicle for Black trans organizing in this country, and maybe even the world. I'm just gonna go out on a limb there, which is led for and by Black trans activists and leaders themselves. So if we were all in a room together, I would ask us all to stand up and hoot and holler, make some noise for this incredible vision, and also this masterclass in how you build out a long-term grant making strategy that's informed by and led by people who are most directly impacted and on the ground. So thank you for that. And I really want to underscore the historic nature of this fund in this particular moment in our history. It's really important to name and to lift up and amplify the contributions of Black trans organizers, Black trans activists, Black trans community leaders, and everyday Black trans folks who have put themselves on the line, on the front lines to contribute to liberation movements in this country since we, as Black people, first arrived to these shores over 400 years ago. And immediately upon learning about this fund and connecting with Bree maybe a little over a year ago, I made sure that the Black Led Movement Fund at Borealis was going to invest in the incubation of this critically important work. So now the Black Led Movement Fund is now a multi-year funder to Black Trans Fund, and I will continue to ride hard for Bree and the Black Trans Fund advisors as they build this organization into an independent entity that will resource Black trans leadership for years to come. And I am so deeply invested in supporting other Black women, other Black trans folk, other Black queer folks in philanthropy in particular, who are raising resources for Black liberation work. And I support this work because, since Black people have been trying to get free, since we were first brought to this country as stolen labor, Black trans people have been at the forefront of the Black liberation movement, even as they have experienced erasure from the very movements that they have helped to build and continue to still lead. And I support this work, and I'm so deeply excited about this work because, the erasure of Black trans organizing from our foundation, from philanthropy's grant-making dockets, is all too real. So you've heard panelists talk about the disinvestment in this work and their experience of having to do the work of giants on a shoestring budgets. And they need resources for staffing, for infrastructure. They need resources to provide health insurance for their staff, wellness supports so that folks can keep going and keep fighting. And, I support this work because at a time when so much is at stake, Black trans leaders offer a blueprint for dreaming and for imagining a world that serves us all, right? A world where trans folks can live fully and with dignity and respect, which is also a world where we can all thrive as fully liberated, self-determined, and self-actualized human beings. And Black trans leaders have been dreaming of and fighting for a world without gender violence, where sex work is not a crime, where we invest in communities and not into the carceral state. And Black trans leaders and their communities are building power and organizing in ways to create a world where no one gets left behind, right? And this vision aligns, this vision of a world where no one gets left behind aligns with all of our grant making dockets, right? There is a space for us to figure out how to connect and invest in this work. None of us are free until all of us are free. And we have Black trans folks in their organizations to also thank for an expanded analysis around gender justice and around community safety that has informed so much of the incredible and impactful work that we've been seeing around, in particular this past year, around the movements to end violence against Black people in this country and to create new possibilities for safety and new opportunities for our communities to thrive and truly experience joy and liberation. So I'm here to offer an invitation to all of you. We're not walking out here with our hands out. We're actually inviting you to be part of this because this is a historic moment, right? We are inviting you to be a small but incredibly significant part of this movement and this historic fund. As funders, it is our duty to trust and proactively invest in visionary movement leaders. And investing in the Black Trans Fund is an opportunity to really learn about what it takes to support Black trans leadership as a pathway to building thriving communities and movements. And so there's incredible value in resourcing this work. For those of us that are in philanthropy that are just starting out in our learning journey around the issues that matter to Black trans folk, investing in the Black Trans Fund offers an opportunity and a very unique opportunity to learn from some of the biggest and baddest leaders in the Black liberation and LGBTQ movement. And it's an opportunity for all of us to learn more about the tremendous landscape of organizations that we should be connecting up with and investing in. And I'm so excited that Black Trans Fund is going to be doing this landscape analysis work so that we all, there's gonna be no more excuses in a little bit of time around why our portfolios are not heavily invested in Black trans organizing work. So I want to ask you all to, consider joining me and other donor partners to move sustainable and long-term support to the Black Trans Fund and to Black trans-led organizations like the ones that we've been blessed to hear from today. And I ask that after this webinar that you really, that you look inside of your institutions and dig deeply into your own institution's grant-making portfolios and think about, right, in the communities in which you are directing resources, what institutions exist in those communities to serve Black trans people, and are they led by Black trans people themselves? Think about, in the communities where you are investing in, what are the health, wealth, and representation statistics for Black trans people where you're funding? For those of you that are LGBTQ funders, how are Black trans organizations showing up in your portfolios? And some of you all that are on this call today have just come around to supporting Black-led movement organizing work. And of those of you who are doing that, think about how many of those organizations are led by Black trans people, and then just increase that a million times. So, because no matter where you fund and whom you fund, I also want you to think about how many of your institutions are committed to resourcing this work for the long haul. And I'm not just talking about the 3 to 5 year grants to help Black Trans Fund get to the independent entity that they will soon be, but I'm talking about legacy funding over the next generation that actually meet the real organizing needs on the ground. As funders, we can't keep expecting long-term transformational change outcomes on $25,000 project support grants, right? So let's leave those practices in 2020 with the rest of the BS that 2020 had to give. So I want you all to consider joining me, pull some resources of the Black Trans Fund. I welcome the opportunity to talk with any of you all one-on-one who are participating in this conversation today. If you want to strategize together about how you can move resources to this work through your own institutions. As a director of the Black-led Movement Fund, which was launched before funding Black folks was sexy or cutting edge in philanthropy, I know firsthand how difficult it is to raise resources for this work. It is a real organizing effort. And the organizing capacity needs of groups are huge. They need huge resources to continue fighting the good fight. So reach out to me and let's figure out how to do this. I want to also invite you all to consider being an ambassador for this fund so that we can reach others in the funding community to introduce them to this incredible work and bring them along. And I'll just end by just saying I'm just so honored to be here. And none of us are free until all of us are free. So let's get to work. Let's resource the Black Trans Fund and all the ways that it needs to be resourced and supported and amplified so that it can be the revolutionary funding vehicle it was designed to be. It is the first national fund of its kind ever that is uplifting and resourcing and building the leadership capacity of Black trans social justice leaders to bring forth joy, liberation, and abundance into this world. So I am so grateful to be here. I will drop my email in the chat. Please let's link up and figure out how we can continue to move money so that the Black Trans Fund becomes a place where the money resides. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Julia. If it wasn't for you and Tanisha McHarris, yeah, I feel like y'all showed up and showed out last year for Black Trans Fund. And so just really wanting to thank you, Julia, for supporting us when we needed it most. And then we would also like to thank some of our funders and donors who helped us move money and fed into our vision last year. So Arcus, Borealis, Philanthropy, California Endowment, Collective Futures Fund, the Tides Foundation, Pipe Fund, the Libra Foundation. We got a bunch of anonymous donations and the Crespi Foundation. And BTF would also not have been able to cover fiscal sponsor fees for all of our fiscally sponsored organizations if it wasn't from the generous support of all of the individual donors who donated to BTF at a level of $5 to $5,000. So thank you all so much for collectively coming together and investing in the liberation and joy of Black trans communities. Thank you so much for joining us and hearing about how Black Trans Fund is transforming philanthropy and investing in Black trans communities. Special thanks to the panelists, Alex, Daranisha, the moderator, Jay Mace, Lady Dane, Joshua, for honoring us with your brilliance. I know that you had other things that you could be doing today, but you stayed here with us to share your work. So just thank you on behalf of Black Trans Fund. Also, thank you, V. Thank you, Julia, for your kind words. And thank you, Groundswell staff, for showing up and helping us get this briefing off the ground. And thank you to everyone who showed up, familiar faces, unfamiliar faces, folks within philanthropy. It is going to take all of us in order to build the new world that BTF is trying to create. And so thank you so much for taking out your time and coming to hear us out. But yeah, we really want to stay connected with folks. So we're just encouraging folks to utilize lessons learned today in their work, in their grant making, and how they talk about Black trans communities. Also, just really wanting to encourage folks to donate to Black Trans Fund directly. And then we also put into the chat our Take Action form, where we are asking folks to become an ambassador of Black Trans Fund. And if you can't become an ambassador for whatever reason, there is space in that form for you to connect us directly with other folks who would support BTF or would be interested in becoming an ambassador. So I just wanted to encourage everyone to check out that Take Action form. Also, we will be following up with folks with an email with a recording from today's webinar. Also, you will find our 2020 docket, BTF one-pager, and the Take Action form in that email as well, but they're also posted in the chat box. And we will also share with you the 5-year plan that we unveiled and went with you all today. Thank you so much for your time, your energy, your love, and your appreciation. My name is Brie Rivera, Program Officer of the Black Trans Fund, and I want to thank you for joining us today and sending everyone joy, love, and liberation.